Well, hey, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Therapy Show. This episode is actually a Podcourse, which means that it qualifies for one continuing education contact hour. If you'd like to learn more about how to purchase that continuing education contact hour, just see the link that's in the show notes. But let's just dive into the content. I want to introduce Eddie Capparucci. Welcome to the show, Eddie. It's so great to have you.
Lisa, so good to be back with you. It's been a long, long time, and I'm very excited about us sitting today and talking about this really important subject.
Yes, it is. And I know that you have been on the show before, so I'll put the link in the show note to that prior episode that you were on because it's really good and I still get a lot of downloads to that episode to this day. So this isn't Eddie is just an incredible therapist, speaker, and he has such a big heart for this topic. Could you share before we dive into everything? I love to give a background on my presenters. So, can you tell us a little bit about your education, how you got here, the certifications that you hold?
Sure, absolutely. I am licensed. I'm a licensed counselor in two states, both North Carolina and Georgia. I'm also a certified life coach. I have a private practice. I've been in private practice now for about 12 years, and I am certified in the treatment of sexual addiction and pornography addiction. So I work with men, and I only work exclusively with men in helping them to understand what is behind their problematic sexual behaviors. I also work with men and helping them to understand that, how can they build their emotional IQ? Because many who suffer from this disorder also are emotionally undeveloped. And that doesn't mean that they're undeveloped in other areas. They're not, but when it comes to emotions, they struggle.
Mhm.
So I've served at counselor at New Life Lives, Every Man Battle. I'm the administrator of two blog, which is Men Against Porn and Sexually Pure Men. And I've also written for numerous, publications and for numerous blogs along the way. I'm a certified clinical supervisor, and I'm also an author of three books with two more in the pipeline.
Awesome. You're a busy guy. You've been doing a lot since we last spoke.
Yeah, my wife would say he's the busiest man in the world. So
Oh, really? Now, is your wife also,
she
does she?
is.
Mhm.
She is. She's a therapist, and she works with the women who are dealing with betrayal trauma.
Okay. Okay. I
So it's
find
a
that
very nice ministry that we have together.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have encountered many therapist duos that do this work together. I find why do you think that is? Like, how does that usually pan out? Just curious.
Well, in most cases, what you have when you look at the duos is that they've been through this.
Mm.
They've already been through it. And with what they've learned, they have decided, you know what, I want to go back and, try to see if we can give to others. If people can learn from us and the mistake we made along the way in the recovery field. Now, Terry and I were a little bit different. As I spelled out, my books and on your show, I, had a major sex addiction. I was a womanizer for until I was almost 38 years old. Terry was not part of that. Terry had her own betrayals that she dealt with along the way, but her and we've been together for 27 years. I've been faithful that entire time for her. And again, shouldn't have to brag about that, but just to show a point. So therefore we're different. She came alongside me because when she saw me go into this field and she saw the work that was being done, she was just very moved by it. And plus the fact that, again, she had dealt with her own betrayal. And she said, you know what? I think I would like to do this also. And I was just so excited by that. And like what I said, for her and I now to collaborate. And in many cases, we're working with couples where I'm working with the husband and she working with the wife. And having that um, ability to come together, her and I, Terry and I, to talk about what's going on your end of the house and what's going on my end of the house, we're able to really offer more in the way to people than if we were just working just with the one spouse.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, because locally I know quite a few duos that work in this field, and I do find it really interesting. And I learned so much from them. You might actually know them, being in the circle. So we'll talk about that offline. Okay, well, so the title once again is Understanding Sex and Porn Addiction and the Negative Consequences. And we have 3 learning objectives that we're going to cover. The first learning objective is define sex addiction and summarize the symptoms. Number 2, explain the negative impacts pornography has on individuals, relationships, and society. And then number 3, identify at least, we said, 3 treatments for sex addiction. So I know you sent me a PowerPoint presentation, and I will include that in the pod course. When people log in, they'll see that presentation as well. So that will be there for you if you decide to purchase the CE Contact Hour. But let's start with defining sex addiction, because a lot of people don't really know what the heck it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go back for a moment though. That PowerPoint that I sent you is chock full of information and insight that are extremely valuable. So I think for people to have an opportunity to, look at that, I think they're going to get a lot out of it. So
Okay.
what is a sex addiction? Well, the first thing to understand, Lisa, is that it's not really about sex. Then people are like, what? What do you mean it's not about sex? Well, basically what it is it's an emotional intimacy disorder. See, we are searching for something else, and it is not about sex. So how do we define a sexual addiction? Well, what that is this excessive preoccupation with sexual fantasies. It's about urges and behaviors that are difficult to control surrounding sex. But most importantly, a sex addiction is when what you're doing spills over into other parts of your life. So whether it's your relationship, whether it's work, people who get behind in their work because they're too focused on things of sexual nature. And many people have gotten fired from their jobs because they're watching pornography at work. Um, it's also the idea that, what is it? How does it spill out over into finances? Some people spend astronomical money when it comes to this disorder, in many different ways. So if it's impacting other areas of your life, including even your health, because again, if you're out there and you're engaging with other people, you again expose yourself to the potential of obtaining a sexual disease. And also legally, there are many people who get into legal situations because of all of this. So again, that's how we'll determine whether or not it is a sexual addiction. You're just preoccupied with, again, sexual thoughts and fantasies, and it spills over into other parts of your life.
Okay. Gotcha. That's real helpful. And so what I know, the DSM doesn't recognize sex addiction, right?
No, it does not. It does not read that. The World Health Organization came out several years ago, and what they've said is they're looking at it and saying that that there is an element that they're looking at from a sexual addiction standpoint that they agree upon. Okay. However, it still has not taken foothold in many different areas. So we're making inroads that people start to take this more seriously because it is a very serious disorder. It causes, chaos in numerous relationships, which we'll talk about later on. But I did want to share with you, I want to give more of an emphasis. I want people to fully understand when I say it's not about sex, it's about a emotional intimacy disorder. So do you mind if I
Yeah.
share? I'll share my testimony on it. As I said, I was a womanizer from the time I was 16. For whatever reason, just having one girlfriend was not enough. I needed to have more. And then when I married for the first time, I thought, oh, okay, this is it. It's solved. I found the woman I love. We're good. It didn't work. It did not happen. Before you knew it, I was again back there doing the same behaviors. And that led to a divorce. I've met another woman. I said, okay, this is the woman. And again, same problem. And when I was about 38 years old and that marriage ended, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot continue to hurt all of these people. I have to find out what this is. And back then, sex addiction wasn't really something that was really very well known. Patrick Carnes was just doing his work in that area back then.
Mhm.
So I went to go see a psychologist who specialized in relationship issues. And as we talked, and she asked me for my story, and I shared my story, and she said to me when we got done, she said, "You know what? You have an attachment disorder." And back then, I had no idea what any of that stuff was. And I go, "I don't know what do you mean?" She goes, "Yeah, you have an avoidant attachment."
Mm.
And I go, "Well, where did that come from?" And well, the story is that when I was 5, my father died suddenly of a heart attack. My mother had a nervous breakdown. There were 4 of us kids. I was number 3, and we each got sent out to individual relatives. These are people I didn't know. Okay. I don't know my father died. I don't even know what death is at that point. All I know is my father's not around, my mother's not around, my siblings aren't around, and I'm sitting here now with all these strangers. And I was there for almost a year with these people before my mother finally got herself together and brought us back.
Mhm.
Well, what that did to me, which again, unknown to me, but subconsciously, I developed this idea of the people who love you will hurt you, and the people who love you will leave you. So here I am as a 16-year-old boy who's starting to date, but subconsciously, there's something going on to say, don't trust her. You can't trust her. So therefore, I was always looking for the backup plan. Again, wasn't, aware of it from a cognitive standpoint, but from an emotional underlining subconscious feeling, those were there.
Right.
And because I did not know that was going on, it wound up causing a lot of destruction over decades of my life. And
Wow.
those are the kind of stories that are out there. And that's why I came up with the inner child model,
Mhm.
because I really do believe that a lot of this is about trauma and it's about unresolved childhood pain point that we need to be able to address.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of therapists would agree with that. I mean, definitely agree with that. Um, and so when you think about it in that context of unresolved trauma, what would be some of the symptoms that somebody would be experiencing that maybe they don't even know they have the unresolved trauma, but it's starting to show up in their life? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it does make sense. And what that comes down to is if you are engaging in behaviors that are harmful to yourself,
Mhm.
harmful to others, that could be very reckless, then that means, there's something going on beneath the surface. Because if you sit there and you're saying to yourself, I don't understand why I do this, then we know there is some sort of link back to some sort of trauma or neglect
Mhm.
that is getting exacerbated by triggers that you're experiencing today. So therefore, we go and we try to identify what are those triggers. First, we identify what are those childhood pain points. Then, what are the triggers that are associated with them? And again, we're looking for emotional triggers.
Mhm.
Okay, so therefore, the idea of I'm not good enough, I don't belong, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy of things like that. People don't chase me. How come they don't chase me? How come I'm not, part of a group?
Mhm.
So it's those emotional triggers that get, as I said, they get exacerbated by an event that we're going through today. And therefore, the biggest thing I believe that addicts struggle with is we don't know how to sit with emotional pain. And we learned at a very, very young age that, you know what, all right, there's no one here showing me what to do with this distress. So I have to come up with a solution. But I don't have a lot of worldly experiences. And I'm also more emotionally based in my thinking than I am cognitively based. So what's the solution that a kid's going to come up with? I won't think about it.
Mm.
I won't think about it. And how do you not think about it? I have to distract myself. Too much television, too much food, too much fantasy in my own head, not sexual fantasy, but just fantasy in general. And we then take that coping mechanism that we've developed and we now bring it into our teen world live in our adult world.
Mhm.
And but what we do is we change out the behavior. And in this case, what we're doing is we're turning to sex, whether it begins with pornography and then maybe escalate to something else. Not everyone who watches pornography that we would look at and label as someone who has a porn addiction, not all of them escalate.
Mhm.
Some of them, what they do, it's porn. That is their life. They do not reach out and try to engage with other people.
Okay. Okay. That's really helpful. So, how many people deal with sex addiction?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's really kind of hard. You don't have a lot of people who are sitting there and raising their hand when people are asking the question. So, are you a sex addict? There's a big stigma that comes with it,
Mhm.
even more so than someone who is an alcoholic or has had problems with drugs or food addiction or many other, addictions that are out there. They all have a stigma, but this one has a very heavy one because people look at it as sex addiction. And then they're like, ooh, does that mean, are you a threat? And
Mhm.
that's what they're looking for. But anyway, to answer your question, it is estimated that from the data that we've seen that between 6 and 8% of those in this country are sex addicts, which would be about 18 million Americans. Now, there have been other surveys that have been done that lower that number down to about 3 to 5%, which is going to bring you into about 14 million. So still, it's a pretty substantial number of people who are out there. And I'll say this to you, that number is going to do because what we're seeing and what we've already started to observe in the last several decades with the availability of pornography just at the click of a mouse, children at a very young age are being exposed
Right.
to it. Where before, like for example, when I was a child, um, it was almost impossible to find pornography. I mean, you had to stumble across it, or you had to find it at somebody else's house, whatever. It just wasn't just there.
Mhm.
Now it's there. Kids are in school; they're sharing pictures on their phone together in elementary school. I
Mm.
mean, so it's going to become a bigger issue
Mhm.
along the way.
Okay. So it's weird when you were saying something about it's going to did you say increase or go up? Because you broke up there. So I just want to make sure that
Oh,
that's what you
yeah,
said.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
No, that's okay.
it's going to definitely increase
Okay.
dramatically.
Okay, gotcha. I just want to make sure 'cause
Because
we
see, the message that pornography is sending
Mhm.
is to little boys is saying, you know what, it's okay to objectify little girls.
Mhm.
But what it's also saying is to little girls, it's okay to be objectified.
Right.
And that is a bad message.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
And that's only one part of it. We're not even talking about the whole gender identity situation that is now being
Mhm.
exploited out there in pornography also, that causing all this great confusion in these young minds. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to make of it.
Right.
All they know is that it is stimulating to them. And with that stimulation, that is where if you continue doing activity that creates high amounts of stimulation and dopamine into your brain, at some point that will become addictive.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's so true. Gosh. didn't think about it like that, but you're right. The access to it is so much easier now than it was even probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. I
Yeah.
mean,
Hmm.
and it's like you said, becoming more and more accessible because,
And you know what else, Lisa, is becoming more acceptable.
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I'd never really watched the Friends, but the show Friends, but my wife was watching some reruns on it, and I was just kind of walking through the living room, and here it is. The girls are talking to the guys about porn and what kind of porn are you watching, and it's almost like
Mm.
this is the norm that everyone should be
Mm.
watching pornography.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and again, I am not the moral police. I am not here to say to people, look, if you and your wife want to watch porn because you think it's stimulating for your relationship, I'm not the guy to sit there and say, no, you shouldn't be doing it. All I know is that from the data I've seen, from the statistics I've seen, that those who engage in pornography on a constant basis wind up creating issues for themselves and for others.
Yes. Yes. And I can, I mean, over the course of the years of being a therapist, I've seen a handful of men who have struggled with sex addiction. And I would say that that's been what I've noticed and what I've seen in when they present and what's going on. And there's so much shame. They don't want to be doing it,
Yes.
it's not something that they want anybody to know about. And there's so much shame and stigma around it. In
And that's
fact, yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, no,
No.
go ahead.
And that shame is what keep people from going and seeking the help they need
Hmm.
because of that. Because again, they want to keep it hidden. They're afraid of that stigma, and so therefore they're just stuck in it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a cycle. It is. And then, gosh, I'm just thinking about cases that I've, had over the years. Okay. So you've gone over the clinical definition of sex addiction. We've talked a little bit about the negative impacts pornography has on individuals' relationships and society, just a little bit. Okay, so let's move into objective number 2. Explain the negative impacts pornography has on individuals' relationships and society. Um, well, maybe first of all, maybe ask this question. Many people see no problem with porn. And would you disagree or agree with that statement?
Okay, so let me tell you how I look at that statement.
Okay.
Um, is there's no problem. Yeah, and I get that quite often from people, and they'll say, you know what, these these women and these men who are in pornography, doing it, they are doing it because they have a high sex drive and they're making good money out of it. And then those who put the amateur stuff up there, they're doing it because they just want to share what they do. Well, I asked this question. Tell me the time you met this 12-year-old girl and you asked her, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And her response was, I think I want to take my clothes off in front of a camera and have sex with strange men and women.
Mm.
Where did you meet her?
Hmm.
No one has ever been able to answer that question. Now, Lisa, I'll say this to you. I do believe there are some little girls out there who could give that answer, but those girls have been hurt
Hmm.
very, very badly by an individual or individuals who have eroded all of their self-worth and they think of themselves as nothing more than an object.
Hmm.
So when people sit there and say to me, there's nothing wrong with porn, I'll say, answer that question. The other thing I'll tell you is I cannot begin to tell you the number of women who I've met, the partners who are so devastated and ashamed and embarrassed because they've engaged in an activity that their boyfriend or husband pushed them into doing that they didn't really want to do,
Hmm.
and they did it anyway because you know what, let's see, if I make him happy, it'll be good. Or if I don't do this, he may go somewhere else to find it. And I cannot begin to tell you the number of women who've been through that.
Right.
And so, and that is driven by porn, because part of what's happening as, people watch it at a younger age, this is how they're learning about sex. It's how they're thinking, they think they're learning about love. It's this, that, oh, women like to be choked when you're having sex. Right? That's what the impression is. Again, kids are watching this usually alone by themselves. They have nobody they're bouncing it off of and saying, is that normal? Is that normal? And so therefore they just take it as, yes, it is. Oh, a woman likes to be slapped when you're having sex. And I actually had clients who came into my office up there where they were dating, and that's where they were dating here. They were coming in to see if they could work on the relationship. And she was saying, we had sex for the first time, and he reached down and he started choking me. And I'm like, what the heck? And I threw him off me. Fortunately, I was able to do that. And then he turned to me and said, well, I thought you would like it because that's what I saw in porn. Women seem to like it. I thought you would like that. So this guy now needed to be retrained about what is true sexuality and to understand everything you see in porn is not what people want. And what we're also seeing in porn is the escalation of violence and humiliation and degrading of women. It is increasing at a dramatic level. And we're even seeing those, people who produce porn are saying, yeah, this is what we are doing. And why are we doing it? Because it's what people are asking for.
So I can definitely see how that negatively impacts, relationships and individuals. Can you take it a little bit further and say maybe how and well, can you take it a little bit further and maybe talk about how it impacts society?
Well, I will. Let me just finish up a little bit more on
Okay.
individuals, though, because
Sure.
there's a
Okay.
ton of data,
Okay.
Lisa. I mean, there is a ton here for it. First and foremost, one, over time, if you're doing it on a chronic basis, that it will become an addictive behavior. Okay. Because the reason being is that it hijacks the reward system in the brain because it's being overloaded with dopamine. Dopamine, that hormone, that's that pleasure enhancing hormone. After a while, level of tolerance start to set in. So therefore, I'm not getting that same rush and that same high. So what do? I escalate. And so with porn, I may escalate to other genres and some of the things that I would never imagine ever looking at in my life. But now I need to look because I'm still looking for that rush. The other thing is that what happened with an individual is that we are seeing more and more cases of erectile dysfunction among 18 to 25-year-olds. Something that was unheard of before is now there. And that is because the idea of what they're doing with the stimulation that they're getting from porn and the chronic masturbation, that when they're with a real person, they can't perform. The other aspect that is really troubling is surveys that have been done to show that over a period of time of watching pornography on a regular basis, that an individual will wind up looking at their partner and not being attracted to them, not finding them to be sexually satisfying. So there are many issues that take place in here, but especially, as I said, the idea that it is a distorted view of sex for younger people. They're seeing this and they're feeling like, oh, this is what true sex is about. Yes, we can have 3 or 4 people, in this relationship with us at times if we want to. And all of that does, it just brings on a lot of problems and tension.
Okay. Tell us how porn negatively impacts relationships.
Well, first and foremost, it's really interesting. There was a survey that was done several years ago among attorneys, and they found that almost 50% of the cases that they were dealing with for divorce mentioned pornography use in it.
Mm.
That people were dissatisfied because they were feeling that a person didn't want to be sexually involved because they were too busy using pornography and masturbation. We're looking and we see that in many cases with the relationships, as I said before, there is this sense of dissatisfaction with your partner. What it does, it steals the emotional intimacy, any of it that you had before.
Mm.
It's just not there. And then what goes on, and the most troubling part of all of it, is that the partner feels betrayed, whether it's porn or it is, actually going out and engaging with other people. They're betrayed. And what we've seen is over 70% of women who have been betrayed, they wind up exhibiting, post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
They are traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
And that trauma is extremely devastating, not just for them,
Mm-hmm.
but also for their partner who betrayed them, because they don't know how to handle it.
Right. Right.
They don't know how to handle what's coming at them. Her brain is on fire, and he's trying to figure out, what do I do to calm her down? So therefore, a lot of energy and effort need to be put into helping those who betrayed learn, how do you help your partner heal. But now think about it. Here we have this innocent person who now have to subject themselves to counseling, to group therapy, to listening to all these podcasts, reading all these books. Their life becomes consumed with recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what did I do to deserve this? I did nothing.
Right.
And yet here I am. I'm stuck here now and trying to get that done. So that's what it does with in the way of relationships. And then when we come to society, the impact that we have here is that, one, the idea that it is there's a lot to do with the idea that there is a connection between pornography and human trafficking. We're seeing a lot of that goes on. In fact, you read horror stories about that quite often. Women who are abducted, forced into pornography, pictures are put out there in different places, trying to get people to buy the videos, the whole video of it. And a lot of these people who are trapped in this are as young as 13, 14 years old. So that becomes a big problem. We realize that with, as I said to you before, one of the consequences in society is the fact that there are a lot of people who are bringing this stuff into work.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one survey showed 2/3 of all human resources professionals have discovered porn on an employee work computer.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are many issues that are going on here, but more importantly, it is the idea that, it's the way we treat one another. And when you start treating people like objects instead of people, we are going to have all types of issues, whether it be on an individual level, whether it be on a relationship level, or it be on a societal level.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Yeah, I can't. I mean, that just blows my mind to think that an HR director is, having to deal with that. It just doesn't cross my mind that that's something that would be coming across the desk. But
Well,
I mean, gosh.
Lisa, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, it wasn't something that came across the desk. It
Right.
wasn't anything they ever had to worry about.
Right.
But now it is. I have one client, he was fired from 4 jobs
Oh.
because he was viewing pornography at work.
Mm-hmm.
4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And again, it's like when we talk about the addictive nature of it,
Right.
it's, the fact that one, he understood the consequences of it, got fired, lost his job, wife was very upset and devastated, finds another one, figures, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. But because he doesn't do the work, understand why he struggled with the addiction, which really the question is not why do I struggle with an addiction? The question is, why do I think, feel, and do what I do?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Because if once they understand why they are thinking certain things, feeling certain emotions, and engaging certain behaviors, they are empowered.
Mm-hmm.
They're very empowered to make real changes in their life. But here it is, the second job, he's there, and before you know it, he gives in, and now we have the same consequence again, and then again, and then again. But you're right, the whole world is evolving and changing in certain ways because of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
Things that people didn't have to worry about before, like again, attorneys having to go into court and talk about, yeah, you have a porn problem. Again, 30 years ago, that was not something that we were bringing up.
Right.
So
Yeah.
again, the whole world is changing with the access being so easy for
Mhm.
people to have.
Okay. All right. So let's move into like assessment and treatment. I'm really curious. Are there assessments that you regularly use or recommend that therapists, have as something that they can um, use when they, are trying to assess if the client has a sex
Right.
addiction?
There are numerous assessments that are out there.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that any of them have ever been, you know, completely certified and quantified for what they do.
Mhm.
Like I said, there's probably hundreds of them. I think the best way to make an assessment of whether or not, someone is dealing with a porn addiction or a sex addiction is to look again at what has been the impact of the disorder on other areas of their lives.
Mhm.
So therefore, if they're struggling, in with sexual fantasies and thoughts on a regular basis, like every day, it's just, interfering with their ability to concentrate, to focus, with their schoolwork, with their work, whatever it may be. There we know, okay, there's one sign. Two, have it built over that you've caused pain to, those who you love.
Mhm.
That would be another aspect of it. Have you gotten into any legal consequences with it? Have you gotten into financial consequences with it? So it's figuring all of that out and looking at it. That's how you make a determination
Okay.
whether or not. Because when people come in, most of the time they're coming in for treatment because the spouse is bringing them in.
Mhm.
That they were caught. There is chaos that's going on in the family dynamics, and that's why they're being brought in. So therefore, whether you do the assessment or not, there's an issue that has to be addressed because we have a person who feels betrayed.
Gotcha.
And that's the big thing that we have to look at. Now,
Mhm.
a person is very different if someone has one affair. If they had an affair, you find out about the affair, and then we see that they're not interested in pornography. They have had no other types of liaisons like that. They don't seem to be preoccupied with sex and sexual thoughts. Then we realize we're dealing with something very different. Okay, and we have to treat it that way, as just that is a case of infidelity.
Gotcha.
And how do we deal with that infidelity still? And there's still some things that we're doing the same way. We definitely want to help the individual who wound up having the affair to understand why.
Mhm. Mhm.
What behind all of this? Why did this occur and to happen? So that's really important.
Okay. So thinking about, since the DSM doesn't recognize sex addiction, how do you, so you assess and you realize that this person is showing the symptoms of addiction or sex addiction. What do you end up diagnosing if you can't, like at what
Yeah,
point?
absolutely. No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And we go to what is, the
Mhm.
standard thing that people are dealing with when they're dealing with a sexual addiction or pornography addiction, or dealing with the relationship issue that's going on right now, anxiety.
Okay.
So we coded under general anxiety disorder
Gotcha.
because that's what's happening right now with it.
Makes sense. Okay. I just wanted to clarify because I know that that would be something I would be wondering about, and what do I do with this? I know it's an addiction, but
And I and I would imagine there are other clinicians who may code it under something else
sure. Sure.
in that way for the diagnosis, but the diagnosis that we're looking at right now is there's a general anxiety disorder. There's also relationship disorders that are going
Mhm.
on. So I mean, you could be putting things in there for it.
Mhm.
If you're talking about what do I do in case of insurance, if I want to um,
Mhm.
put it there. If it's not for insurance reasons, and again, you're just making a general diagnosis, I am not a big fan of putting labels.
Mhm.
I mean, I hate the term sex addiction,
Mhm.
porn addiction.
Mhm.
It is not the label I want people to wear.
Right.
What I look at it and say, you know what, we have an addictive brain, and we do.
Mhm.
That's what it's about. It's an addictive brain. And what's the problem with the addictive brain? Oh, a compulsive disorder.
Right.
So therefore, now you can go down that pathway and
Mhm.
start talking about compulsive disorder because
Yeah.
that's what you're dealing with here also.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, attachment disorder, avoidant and attachment disorder. So you're looking at a lot of different areas here of what's
This,
going on.
the one thing I've come to learn about this in the last, 12, 13 years is that this is not black and white.
Right.
This whole disorder issue, there are many, many shades of gray,
Yeah.
and there are many moving parts. And therefore, and again, as you and I were talking even before we started here, there's the whole aspect of it of beyond treating the addiction. Once you're sober,
Mhm.
then there's another aspect of it, and that is how do you start to learn how to truly emotionally bond and engage with other people? Because most people who deal with this disorder, they have low emotional IQs.
Mhm.
They can tell you, that they're angry, they're sad, they're happy, they're afraid. They can't drill down and tell you what they really feel. It's interesting as you sit across from a client and you're talking about, a circumstance that happened, and you say, okay, put a name to the feeling, and they just
Mhm.
sit there and they're blank. They're blank. You go, I don't know. I don't know what it is. And you have to pull out the feeling wheel and give it to them and say, okay, look here underneath, the sad area or the angry area. What is it that you're really feeling? Oh, I feel belittled. That's what it is. Something like that.
Mhm.
Humiliated.
Mhm.
And so we need to be able to teach them how to put word to those emotions. We also need to teach them, which is something that's very important, that when someone is trying to be emotional with them, that how can they take on those emotions? I don't mean take on that as part of them, but to be able to manage it and deal with it as opposed to minimizing it. It's no big deal. I don't know why you're worried about it. Just move on, or trying to fix it
Mhm.
for them. It's that joke about men are always trying to fix women's emotional problems, right?
Mhm.
We're not doing it because we want to show you how brilliant we are. We're doing it because we want the anxiety to go away. We want to shut this thing down,
Mhm.
just not to deal with it anymore. That's what we're trying to do. So that's a whole nother aspect that we have to be able to work with clients on, to be able to show them, hey, you know what, there's more than just not engaging in the bad behaviors you've been engaging in. We need to be able to go beyond so that you can be more emotionally engaged and connected with others.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because I see some, some similar treatment. What's the word I'm looking for? Well, I guess similar techniques with alcohol addiction. You have to stop the behavior first, and then you can work on the coping skills, because learning the
Correct.
coping skills while you're still actively using is not gonna, that's, you've probably
That's
tried
it.
that. It doesn't work
Now, I'll
well.
tell you, here it's a little bit different,
Mhm.
okay? Because, you are dealing with, you have the person who is struggling with the disorder, but then you also have someone else in most cases who is dealing with the betrayal trauma. Well, you can't put on hold like, oh, I'm not going to show you how to deal with her hurt and her pain. Okay. Because again, you're dealing with the idea. Remember, I said to you before, one issue that those who are struggling with addiction have, they can't sit with emotional pain. Well,
Mhm.
guess what? They are facing emotional pain unlike anything they've ever experienced before.
Right.
Okay, because when her brain is on fire, it's all coming. As I said, she's got a barrel of rock and she can throw them, and
Right.
that's okay. But I need to be able to teach them how not to be defensive,
Right.
how not to try to minimize, how try not to solve their problem,
Mhm.
and especially not to, oh, you need to calm down. I that's like the kiss of death that we get with when people say that. So I have to start teaching some of that skill set also,
Mhm.
so that they learn to how to validate, they learn how to have empathy and to understand, because all they see is hostility, and they have to learn how to see pain.
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. You know, your wife doing the work of working with the spouses or the betrayed partners. What it must be like. It just sounds. So let me ask you this: do you do couples work, or you don't do that yet,
I
or?
used I used to do couples.
Mhm.
I've moved on from that, and my wife actually now will take the couples and
Gotcha.
do that. And although I let me to be completely honest, I do have maybe two couples
Mhm.
in my practice at any given time. So
Okay.
I still do limited number of it. But I really I want to save my slot. I want to save for the sessions that I have for the men who need it, because the problem is so vast.
Right.
And that's where I'd like to just keep my emphasis. However, I do tend to, do some couple work. Before, years ago, before Terry got involved, I would do that also.
Okay. Okay. But it is okay to do the couples work as the men are going through their own
There,
treatment. It's
there is, there is a lot of debate and
Mhm.
argument that, it's like, well, if you're dealing with the uh, betrayer, you shouldn't be counseling the betrayed.
Mhm.
There are other people who believe no, it's okay to do both,
Mhm.
because again, to get a better understanding for that. And also, there's some people who say once have treated the individual, then you should send them off to a couples counselor. Other people believe no, I know them better, and therefore I can do that.
Mhm.
So it all depends on what your philosophy is. But I say this: if you're going to do couples counseling, make sure you're trained in couples counseling. Just because you know the story and you know the background of these two individuals, that doesn't make you qualified to do couple work.
Right.
You have to know the skill set, like talked about it before, and whether it's internal family system work, which I think is amazing stuff to do here, or you emotionally focused therapy.
Mhm.
Okay, Sue Johnson. I mean, being able to teach people how to not talk about the stuff, talk about how you feel about the stuff.
Right.
So you need to have that background, because if you're going to try to say, well, I know your story, I know your story, let's come together and see how we can, bring this relationship back, you're going to struggle and they're going to struggle.
Right. I think that's really good advice. Really sound advice. And also maybe supervision if you are new to this this topic or this issue, definitely, you might be ethically, it's within your scope to do it, but are you competent? Are you competent in this scope? So I think that's really important. As if you're listening and you think you want to get into this work, definitely get some more training, get some supervision. Specialized training would be super helpful, I imagine.
You know what, Lisa, is necessary.
Yeah.
We have seen people who have come to us who have sat down with folks who are not, certified, not specialized in this field,
Mhm.
and they have done more damage.
Mm.
There's nothing worse than someone turning to the betrayed spouse and saying, well, what do you think your part has been in all of this? Now,
Mhm.
again, that's somebody who, you're looking at it from a marriage
Mhm.
counseling perspective, which we look at and we say, yeah, usually, there's blame on both sides. But in this circumstance, when somebody has gone out and betrayed, and I don't even care if, let's say, it's been a sexless marriage because the one spouse just says, I don't want to engage in sex any longer, but you have other options. You didn't have to go and engage in infidelity. You had other options. They said, let's go to therapy.
Mhm.
Let's look at treatment. If worse came to worse, like, you know what? I can't deal with this anymore. Let's get divorced.
Mhm.
Okay. That you had those other things that you could have done and
Mhm.
you didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about objective number 3, which is identify at least 3 treatments for sex addiction.
Okay, so treatments. We look at, a couple things. One, if a person have really been dealing with some very, very severe behaviors and has been doing it over a long course of time and they're at a point they're just struggling and can't stop. One thing that we'd be looking at is in treatment programs. And there are many of those throughout the country that people can go. Usually in this residential program, they're there for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, where they are going to be giving a complete overview of what the addiction is about, why is it in their lives. They'll probably go back and do some work on childhood trauma and betrayal, and there'll also be work that is done between the couples. In most cases, when they're doing this in-house treatment, they may wind up doing a disclosure where the betrayed partner will outline, all the offenses and basically really outlining their sexual history from the very beginning to the end. And therefore, then sharing that, sitting and talking and sharing that in front of um, a counselor with their spouse. So you may see some of those. Not all treatment programs do that, but some do, the more long-term ones. But there are some that people are in there for up to 3 months.
Mm.
So we have that. But when we look at, okay, what is the primary therapeutic model that is used, in most cases, it is cognitive behavioral therapy. We're talking about talk therapy because we're trying to get people to learn to understand, again, what has gone on here. Why am I stuck in this? And part of what happened with, as I went through looking at this and working with people, was I took a lot of different aspects of things, including internal family systems, and I created what was called the inner child model for the treatment of sex and porn addiction. And basically what that is, that's a trauma model. And what we're doing is we're focusing on 3 areas. One is unresolved childhood pain points. 2, the inability to sit with emotional distress and discomfort. And 3, it is in the area of being emotionally undeveloped. So we're taking all of those components and we are trying to get a person to understand the why question. Why do I think, feel, and act the way I do? As I said to you before, If that happens, then a person's empowered to make real changes in their life. So that's basically that gives you the sense of the three things that most people, and sometimes medication, we may need that for a short period of time.
Mhm.
Talking about antidepressants, which again will kind of just lower the anxiety level somewhat. Again, to help people better, it's like giving them an edge when they're trying to learn all of this information and also go back and address some of the traumas that they've had in their lives.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I'm wondering, this is the framework that you came up with. Um, when somebody is when you said cognitive behavioral therapy, and then you bring in the IFS, and then you have your model. I mean, it really sounds like it's kind of dependent on what the patient or the client presents with as to which direction you might need to go, as in like which treatment is would
Well,
have the most success.
for me, when it comes to the inner child model,
Mhm.
I'm using CBT.
Okay.
Okay, that's there
Mhm.
because it is all about talk
Gotcha.
and getting them to understand. Um, the internal family system model is in there, even though, I've known about it, but I didn't realize when I put the model together that was actually leaning on that.
Mhm.
And people pointed that out. It was actually my wife who pointed it out. She goes, wow, this is a lot like family systems. I go, yeah, well, now that you mention it, it is.
Mhm.
But what I've done was I identified 9, and now they're going to be 11 different inner children that all deal with potential emotional pain points that
Mhm.
people have to deal with.
Okay.
And then there's a lot in the area of mindfulness that comes into this and helping them to learn their emotional triggers. But more importantly, to go through this idea of what I feel
Mhm.
and slowing everything down and moving over to but what is real.
Gotcha.
Because a lot of times we're running on our emotions.
Mhm.
Our emotions are inaccurate sometimes, and we need to be able to sort them out and realize, okay, what am I really dealing with today? So I
Mhm.
can make a healthy decision
Mhm.
instead of running away.
Okay. Okay. This sounds great. I know that is your book more of a treatment approach for therapists, or is it more of a book for clients or patients?
It's for both.
Okay.
But I do see what we see are more clients
Mhm.
purchasing the book, getting the book.
Okay.
However, what we're also seeing a ton of lately are groups starting up, which
Mm.
clinicians are running.
Mhm.
So I get probably 3, 4 calls or emails a week from clinicians who have said, "Hey, I found your book," or somebody walked in with your book and
Mhm.
says, "I want to do something on this," and they've taken over and just ran with it. I've also what I did when I launched the inner child model about 3 years ago and the book came out, I was just inundated with calls. And so what we did was we created a training program for clinicians on the inner child model. So therefore, then they can get certified in that, and they can be doing that in their own practice. So we have that program that's out there and available.
That's great. Speaking of group, um, I so talk about group therapy for this population. What are you finding with that?
What we find in this population with group therapy is it's something that really, let's go back to again the idea of men not being emotionally developed.
Mhm.
Okay. Just like any other support group, the one really beneficial thing that happens here is that there's bonding. There's bonding between the men. And what do they really bond on? They bond on listening to each other, stories of what happened to them as a child
Mhm.
and, the trauma or the neglect that they went through. And they're able to say, oh my gosh, I had something very similar
Mhm.
to that. Or even if I didn't have something similar, I can start to develop a sense of empathy. Because again, we go back to the idea that these men don't have
Mhm.
strong emotional IQs. So that part of what we're really learning in this group. So they're trying to identify, one, what are my core emotional triggers? What are my emotional, childhood pain points? And we're trying to teach them how to become more emotionally developed, more emotionally engaged. So that's the model for the groups that we do.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Yeah, I know that there's a local therapist here, and he has great success with group therapy for his male clients that are dealing with sex addiction. And I know he would say a very similar thing. It's really really interesting. Okay, well, there's lots of ways that we can approach it if in terms of treatment, I guess, is um, just maybe know that you're working from a trauma model potentially, and then the cognitive behavioral therapy is important, as well as the IFS or internal family systems. And then group is helpful because it helps with understanding what other people are going through, how to be empathic or empathetic, and listening and bonding is
Right.
part of it
But
as
you could
well.
see what we have. We have a whole package.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to do with the model, to
Okay.
cover all the bases that people need in
Mm-hmm.
order to treat the complete person and not just, the disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, I'm no longer looking at porn. Yes, I'm no longer stepping out of the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. We are looking, the inner child model is about the transformation of the heart,
Awesome.
about becoming a new man. And by the way, we have the book that's going to be coming out for women,
Mm-hmm.
going deeper,
Mm-hmm.
for women, will be coming out next year. Because it's something people have been bugging me since the first book came out, and I've been able to work with a couple of women that their audience, that's what they do, and we're very, very excited about that.
Yes, because I was going to ask about women and sex addiction. So I'm glad that that you brought that up, and that there's going to be a treatment, a book, well, treatment or a book coming out that's specializes for
Yeah,
women.
and what we refer to it as is love addiction slash porn addiction,
Okay.
because most women are more into the relationship issue when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
their addictive behaviors, and not so much just the running out in the casual sex. There are some who do that,
Mm-hmm.
but for the majority of the women, it's more along the lines of looking for that emotional
Mm-hmm.
connection with people.
Okay. Okay. So last question. I know we are definitely coming up on an hour here. So last question. So how does someone become certified to treat sex addiction?
Yes, I partnered with a ministry called Be Broken Ministries, and what they do is they work with both men, women, and couples, and helping them to restore their marriage after infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
And I partnered with them. They approached me, and what we did was we put together an online program where clinicians can go and get certified, and we charge $197 for it. I
Wow.
mean, yeah, it's nothing, because one, we're not trying to make money on it.
Mm-hmm.
What we're trying to do is get enough clinicians out there, because the demand, I get between 10 and 15 calls a week from people who have seen the book and they're looking for help.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it because I don't have that type of bandwidth. Fortunately, right now I have a nice stable of, clinicians that I can refer people out to, and that's what we're doing. And we have people not just in this country, but all over the world
Mm-hmm.
that are doing this approach also. So, but we're looking for more. And again, we look at the inner child model. It is just one element of your overall treatment, with this disorder.
Mm-hmm.
We're still, I mean, again, we need to make sure we're stabilizing them first and foremost. Okay, doing the things that need to be done as far as, having accountability, putting that software on their phones if they need it,
Mm-hmm.
teaching them what they need to do to help their spouse feel more safe at the moment. There's all those components that are there too.
Mm-hmm.
But, what we're doing here with the clinicians is giving them the tools, and it's a 12-part series, and they can do it at their own pace.
Okay. Oh, that sounds great. I'll definitely put a link in the show notes for everybody to
Yeah.
check that out. Are there other training programs out there aside? I mean, I'm guessing there are. What other options are there?
Yeah, from it for a clinician
Mhm.
standpoint. Yeah,
Right.
they could become if you become a certified sex addiction specialist,
Hmm.
CSAT, you can
Okay.
go and oh, I'm sorry, that's a CSASI, or you could become a certified sex addiction counselor.
Mhm.
You are therapist, I'm sorry, you wind up as a CSAT. So there are many different training programs out there, probably about 4 or 5,
Okay.
where people can go earn their certification. Those are much more in depth. They are, and I fully recommend those. In
Hmm.
fact, I don't think you should be, doing this work unless you have one of those certifications
Sure.
after your name. I think you need that first and foremost. The inner child model is again more of the specialty thing that you can add to that.
Hmm.
But yes, you definitely need to be going through the more intense program, and they can last anywhere from 1 to 2 years as
Hmm.
far as the training. But again, it's valuable, it's needed. As I said to you before, Lisa, there
Hmm.
are so many moving parts,
Right.
so many moving parts, and you got to be able to handle all of them because if you drop one,
Yeah.
the whole thing just collapses in front of you.
Right, right. Okay, that's really good advice. I'm so glad that you said that because I do want to remind people that while this is, a continuing education credit, this is really an introduction and an overview to what is sex addiction and how it can impact people. So if somebody walks into your office and presents with these symptoms or with these stories, you have enough uh, information at this point. I'm hopeful that you can probably assess and refer to somebody that can really help this person. So thank you so much for, putting this together and coming on and sharing your expertise. And I really, really appreciate it. I know we're going to help so many people. And it's funny, Eddie, because when I put your episode out last time, I got a lot of people on social media asking me for help with this. And it really kind of took me back because I thought, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but there's so many
Hmm.
people who are suffering and want, they want to stop the behavior and they want help. And there's just so if you're a therapist out there and somebody walks in, yes, know what you're looking at and what you're dealing with, but probably if you're not a specialist and you're not super, trained in this, then refer out. So learn in your community who can do this work and who you can refer to and how you can, be that warm transfer to somebody that can address this with that client. So thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we end the
Well,
episode?
I think we covered off on quite a bit of stuff, and I think what you ended on was the most important note. Again, what's our mantra is do no harm.
Yeah.
So therefore, and again, and this is not for us being territorial
Right.
as CSACs or CSASs. You know what? We want more. We need more clinicians. This is a major problem and is becoming an epidemic. And I feel my heart goes out to the next generation of
Mhm.
therapists because I don't know how they're going to handle the volume of it.
Right.
So again, if it's something that is a topic that you found somewhat interesting, then perhaps do investigate to see about becoming certified in the treatment because as I said, the need is great and there are so few of us to be able to help them.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that because I hear what you're saying and I hate that that's the case, but it sounds like there's a need. And so if this is something that, grabs your attention and you would like to look more into it, then I will put some links in the show notes and you guys can go and learn more. So thanks, Eddie, for being here. I really appreciate it. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.